On question 22, we want to write the recursive, so we have to figure out, are we doing arithmetic or geometric? Well, from 50 to 3, or 3 minus 50 is negative 47. Do I subtract 47 from 3 to negative 44? Sure you do. So to write my recursive, I'm going to say my first term is 50. And then to find any term, I take the previous term and I'm going to subtract 47. And there's your answer to our first problem there in 22. Now in 23, it looks like I'm multiplying by 2 each time, aren't I? So my first term is going to be 1/8. Well, I forgot to say n is greater than or equal to 2 on that one. And then a sub n is going to be my previous term, or 2 times my previous term. I think I'll write that first. I'll write the 2 first. So 2 times a n minus 1, provided n is greater than or equal to 2. On number 24, tell me, are they going to be rational or irrational when I add them? Well, notice the square root of 8, that's 2 square roots of 2. That's irrational. The square root of 81 is 9. Well, if I add 2 square roots of 2 and 9, that's irrational, because the square root of 2 is irrational. Whereas the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 9 is 3, well, that'll be rational. 3 minus the square root, it's plus and negative actually, but plus and negative 6, that will be rational, won't it? And notice the square root of 3 is irrational, the square root of 2 is irrational, so that'll be irrational. On 25, we want to select all the numbers that will give me a square root, or that will produce a rational number when I multiply it. So if I take the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, or times the square root of 1, well, that's the square root of 5. That's irrational, so we're not going to choose that one. If I do 5 square roots of 5, well, that's irrational. If I do the square root of 20 times the square root of 5, that's going to be the square root of 100, and the square root of 100 is 10. So there's your first rational answer when you multiply by 5. How about if I do this, How about if I do the square root of 45? Geez. The square root of 45 times the square root of 5. Well, I know 5 goes into 45 9 times. And I see that the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, that'll be 5. The square root of 9 is 3, so I'll get 15 for an answer. So that will be rational. Now, if I multiply a whole number by a square root, I'm just going to get a square root, so those won't work. Okay, let's take a look. If I got x to the 4/3 power bigger than 1, I know that's true for some values of x. Which interval is going to make it true? How about if x is 0? Well, that's kind of confusing because some of them are going to be bigger than 1, but not all of them. Like if x is negative 1/2, that won't work. So I'm going to say no to that one. X is less than 1, that will definitely not be less than 1. Bigger than 0, well, as long as it was bigger than, let's look k. It would be true for all values of x is greater than 1. X is greater than 0 would be true for anything as long as x was bigger than 1, but that's not just bigger than 0. So it wouldn't be true for 1/2 or 3/4. So the only one it's true for is x is greater than 1. Question 26.